So hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. My name is Hart. I'm not putting my top on to be weird, but this is one of the reasons why I was gone for 2 months. So one of them was I was on holiday. So as you can see, I went to Disney. We took our little ones to Disney World for a couple of weeks. But the main thing that we did in the 2 months while I was off and I was away is I finally got to go back home. Now, not going to get emotional, but I was away from home for about 18 months. We couldn't travel because of COVID restrictions. So the second that I knew I could get back home, I was on a plane and I got to see my mum, my dad, my brother, my friends, everyone. And I was so happy. And I was going to be in the mindset of filming a bunch of workouts prior to leaving. It was getting shorter and shorter in terms of the amount of time that I actually had to get all the training and the videos put in. So there are a few videos that I did prior to me going back, which is why there's certain things that look a little bit different in the workouts I've released this week compared to some of the ones that I released in weeks 1 through to about 3, just 3 day 1. One of them being noticeable is my hair. My hair is starting to grow back. So I don't know if you were noticing, but during my workouts, there was definitely a lot of postpartum hair loss. That's something that naturally occurs. So if you are going through that too, don't worry, it does start growing back. It is little tiny baby hairs at the moment, but it does get easier, it does get better. I'm still losing a lot of hair at the moment, so you may feel a bit disheartened. I'm about 7 months postpartum now, but I know that there is hair growth coming back, and my hairdresser told me that too, so that made me feel a lot happier, because when you start pulling at all that hair, it does become a bit disheartening, but it does come back. So that's why the workouts look a little bit different. In terms of my physique, I was training even on those months that I was off, but I was still following a very similar pattern to what I would be doing now. So all the workouts and all the content that I'm releasing, I'm not done anything more intense than what I'm doing right now, because that wouldn't be fair to you. It wouldn't be fair to create some workouts and then say I've been doing burpees. Definitely have not been doing burpees. I've been doing my normal weighted sessions that I've been showing you, about the level that I'm doing right now. So nothing new, nothing crazy and off the back. Disney was a great holiday. It gave me the chance to do some training in more humid conditions, and by that I mean my running. So when I went back to the UK, I went back to see my family. I did do my running. I've obviously had a few setbacks in terms of Disney and my marathon. One being that I had surgery on my feet, nothing too major, but I couldn't run or wear trainers for a couple of weeks. So I really was restricted to the amount of workouts and exercising that I was doing in general anyway. Then I had 2 bouts of the flu. Who would think that? One of them really hit me like a freight train. It was when I was back home. So I'd started doing some running about 3 times a week, nothing more than about 6K, because I was trying to get back into the swing of things. And then, would you know, I had the flu. I took about 20 COVID tests. I was very paranoid. I was like, well, I'm going to get COVID the next day. Didn't get COVID, it was definitely the flu, but I've lost all my appetite for about a week. I lost an awful lot of weight, which I've had to regain to try and keep my strength and my conditioning and make sure I have enough energy to do these long runs. I will show you on the screen here. So these are the sort of runs that I'm doing on a weekly basis. So I'm doing about 4 runs a week, one of them being a 30-minute interval training sort of session, trying to push my times, because my times seem to be stagnating about 6 minutes a kilometre, if not about 5:50. That's about the peak that I can really get. I do feel like I'm sprinting a lot of the time, so that's a little bit disheartening to what I've been used to doing. And knowing that I used to do about a minute faster per kilometre, that's something that I've got to get mentally around, because I haven't been running properly since before the children. So I've got to take into account that that is not going to be the go-to and it's going to happen straight away. And yes, I've had to have my husband tell me that. It's not something that I've told myself. I've been doing one light run as well, so just sort of slower the pace, similar sort of time, about 30-35 minutes. Another one that's just under an hour, about 50 minutes plus, but I've been doing a lot of hill training. Luckily where I live, or unfortunately, it is a lot of hills, so no matter where I go, I'm gonna bump into a hill, which at the time is really disheartening, but then when you do it week on week and then you find that you can actually do some of the really difficult hills, you know that you're making the progress that you need to be making. This weekend I did my first 24-kilometre run, so that's over a half marathon. Half marathon's 13 miles, which is 21k. So I've done over a half marathon, and then I did over half a marathon, and I was like, I've still got to do another half. Again, and by that point, that's about the 21 kilometres, that's when my body was just in absolute shutdown. So doing those last 3 kilometres really was a struggle, whereas before, again, pre-babies, pre-pregnancies, doing 17 miles was nothing. It was an easy thing to do. I'd finish my 17 miles and then I'd be in the gym and probably doing another workout, being a bit mental, to be honest. So this is a really humbling experience, I think, more than anything. In terms of the training, I'm really trying to put the time in, even if it means I'm running when it's pitch black and I'm using my torchlight on my iPhone to keep me going. So as much as I'd like to go out running in daylight all the time, we can't. My husband works full time. We don't have like my mum and dad over here for like grandparent support. So it is basically pick and choose when you can do workouts, and at the weekends I just have to say to my husband, sorry, I'm gonna have to go running for about 2.5 hours, which is fine. We've got a few weeks left and then the marathon takes place. I will see how it goes. I'm not in the mindset where I've got to really hit personal best. I think if I was trying to hit a personal best, that'd be super unrealistic and it wouldn't be hitting any of those SMART targets that you would learn about if you did A-level PE. So you want to make sure that you are keeping that realistic. Some of the tips that I'm finding at the moment, one is to set yourself a goal in mind each week, so what you want to achieve. So for me, it's just making sure that my long runs, I'm increasing them in terms of the kilometers and trying to maintain at least the time that I'm doing per split. So if I'm doing a 6-minute kilometer, I don't really want to go above that at all. I want to make sure that I'm keeping in line with that, and if possible, finding those moments when you can sprint. Now, there are tactics involved with that. So obviously if you're going uphill, the worst thing you want to do is sprint up that whole hill, because if you're doing a marathon, the end of the hill isn't the end of the marathon. You might do a hill at the start and then you've got another 25 miles. Not the best thing to do. So the best thing in terms of that is to just pace yourself, enable yourself to get up that hill, recover yourself aerobically, so you don't want to be depleting all your stores by going uphill, because you're going to use more energy to go up that hill. So you want to make sure you're keeping that in mind, and that when you get to the top of the hill, don't do what you think you should do, which is really try to pick up the pace and try and sprint it out to make up for that hill. You actually want to gradually increase it. Remember, with marathons, you're pacing yourself constantly. If you do sprinting during a marathon, probably doing the wrong thing. The only time you might potentially want to sprint is when you see the finish line and it's like 10 meters away, because that'll be about the only time that your legs may have the potential for a bit of a run. Going downhill, similar to going uphill, you don't want to sprint out downhill, because sprinting downhill really puts a lot of pressure onto your knees and your joints, and it can actually cause injury and will really affect you when you're doing your recovery the next day. But what I would say is that you can obviously speed up a little bit, because it feels great going downhill. Depending on the level of decline, if it's a slightly less decline, so if it's a really shallow hill, that's a great one to run down. Speed it up a little bit, try and hit one of those faster kilometer times or mile times that you're doing, and then allow yourself to peak out and just gradually like peter out as you're doing your longer runs. So I've got about 2 months left before my marathon, so I do need to make sure that I am fitting in those longer runs. You don't need to do more than one really long run once a week. If you want to do more, then if you've got the time, great, but don't force yourself to do them. Make sure that you are running consistently as much as possible. Things get in the way, so you might have a cold, you might have lots going on in terms of life, so you might have lots going on. Obviously we've got Thanksgiving coming up, Halloween's coming up, we've got Christmas coming up, so there's a lot of obstacles that can be in the way in terms of your training pattern. But put yourself first as much as you can. So if you're doing it around this sort of time, your training schedule, just make sure that you know what days certain things fall on, because you'll know, for example, that you're not going to be able to run on Christmas Day. If it's your normal weekend run, just switch it around if you can, but make sure that you are keeping that training schedule as much as possible. With this time of year as well, remember, depending on where you live, for me it's starting to get colder, it's going to drop rapidly, so that will affect how you warm up during your run. It sounds really odd to say that, but when you're running in the warmth, it doesn't like hit you as hard in the lungs, it doesn't hit you in like the legs, you don't feel like your legs are freezing off. But when you're in the cold, you need to layer up appropriately, but don't over layer. That's one thing. When I did my first marathon, I was wearing like a long jacket. I had my leggings on, I had an undershirt, I was super boiling by about 10 miles in, and luckily I found my husband. I threw my top to him. You still want to be training in what you will probably train for the marathon if you're doing the really long run, because you know that eventually you're going to warm up to an extent. At the end of the day, when you're doing your shorter runs, maybe your 30-minute ones, you're not going to get to the point where you're probably going to be absolutely boiling unless you're doing interval training. So you can probably layer up a little bit, but don't try and overheat. You certainly don't want to be over sweating, and you don't want to exhaust yourself. Still think about making sure that you take water on you with your runs if you've got the chance, if you've got one of those belts, or if you don't mind carrying them. I'm rubbish for doing that, I'm not going to lie. I should definitely take more water on my runs, but I will. On the race course it's fine, because you have water stops on the way, even if you take the smallest amount of water possible. When I'm doing a really long run, I might do a loop, stop by my house and do another loop. That enables me to do the water break, take on the fluids, and just enjoy it. Try and enjoy it as much as possible. And that's what I'm trying to do at the moment. So that's the reason for 1, why I've been away for 2 months. 2, what's happening with my training. And if you're doing Run Disney 2022, come and say hi to me. Good luck if you're doing it and keep going with that training. But for me, it's bye for now.